to change that. This song is way louder than the other ones for some reason. I've enjoyed this particular song. When I started doing a lot of the online stuff, I was like, I need some music like beforehand, you know? And so this particular song is amazing for that because it's exactly 2 minutes long, and it's like very, you know, jaunty and stuff, and like, so I can like, if we're about to start something, you know, if the program's about to start and there's like someone else who's sort of running it, I can be like, okay, that's the 2-minute warning, you know? And I can even tell them, when you hear the whistling song, you'll know which one it is. Yeah. I'm gonna give folks exactly. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. If it was the beginning of, I think that part 2 was the last Excel class I did before COVID. Right. Slept a few times since then. Right. Yeah. The formulas are so useful. Yeah, for sure. Exactly. Visually, it's a lot different. Yeah. Well, and now it's 11, so. But I'm thinking eventually I might do a class that's just about that, like getting around in Windows 11, because it, you know, it's like, I mean, that's the thing, like, really the looks of it are the main things that are different, you know, but that's significant because you're like, well, it's over here, the thing that I'm looking for, right? Oh, no, this is over here now, and so where's the other thing? Exactly. Yeah. I do, yeah. We used to call it Open Lab. We renamed it to Drop-In Tech Help so people wouldn't know what it was and not wonder if they were going to get their blood drawn or something. Right. Yeah, go for it. We can probably tackle it during one of those, I would think. Right, okay. Yeah, probably. I would imagine that's something that exists. You want me to pour some water? I'd be happy to. Alexa, set a timer for 3 minutes. That'll be for both of ours. What's up? Yeah. Sure. Okay. Oh, sure. Yeah. I see what you mean by basic now, in a very literal sense. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that was my first thought was, oh, we need a DOS emulator.
But there's no way that I know of you can.
Oh, okay. Huh. That's interesting. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Well, I don't know how to do that, but I think we can figure it out, and I'm excited to try. Sure. I mean, if y'all want to come by on a Tuesday afternoon, I'm here, you know, that's when we usually do the drop-in tech help right now. I'm here, you know, 99% of the time, and I actually have a team now. So I've got, there's 5 of us, but one doesn't, that's not in his wheelhouse necessarily, although sometimes he's around. But we can. But honestly, that kind of problem is interesting to me. So yeah, I'm excited to give it a shot. Usually we'll do at least noon to 4. So. And if people are, you know, if folks happen to be here, then we don't have to end strictly at 4, because honestly, there's not a whole lot of the day left by then, and so. Alexa, stop. Do you normally work on a laptop or is it a desktop? Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
Keyboard is different from the old style. It doesn't.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, I've got a zillion keyboards in there, so you don't have to bring a keyboard, like, and I mean, to be honest, unless it's for a very specific purpose that involves travel, I've never, I hate using the ones that don't have multiple on them. So yeah, there are plenty of full-size keyboards in my office. Yeah. Probably. I would think the emulator community really they're very savvy, and a lot of it's volunteer stuff. So they're trying to keep on top of it for their own purposes and stuff. So yeah, I can't imagine it wouldn't work on pretty much anything. Sure. Yeah. Just a screenshot. Right. Yeah. Sure. It's network, right? Yeah. Usually that sort of thing is that's the kind of thing that emulator developers spend a lot of time playing with. I mean, it's a little trickier because I know a lot of the emulators are for gaming, primarily. And so, yeah, and so they probably, printing's probably something they don't focus on quite as much, but I'm sure there are a lot of people who are wanting to use it for other purposes like that, and and one of the things they do a lot is try to sort of translate so that the emulator will talk to modern hardware, or at least it'll talk to the software layer of your operating system that talks to the hardware, Yeah, right. So I think, there's probably a setting somewhere, or there's some additional, module of code that we can add, or something like that. And there's always workarounds too. One of the nice things now, Windows 10, they started doing this thing where printing to a PDF is built into Windows now. So you can if you go to print something, select a printer, and then, but rather than selecting a physical printer, you select Microsoft Print to PDF, and it creates a PDF file that's basically, just like a piece of paper but digital. And like, there's a lot of little workarounds and stuff. I love trying to figure stuff like that out. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. To really do anything. Yeah. Right, yeah. That's tricky, yeah. Right. That's probably a possibility too, but hopefully we can do it with software, because then you don't have to worry so much about maintaining the old hardware. Well, looks like we got one person hanging out. Let's see if we can get it rolling. Nah, my voice carries, so. Eventually, I'll hopefully be up there for too long. We're gonna replace, these computers get replaced on Friday actually, and we're gonna move we're gonna have a little, hopefully, I'm having a meeting about this today, we're gonna have like kind of a podium up there that's with similar setup but a little cleaner looking, and some software that the advantage of being back here is I can see people's screens and see when they're stuck, but we're hopefully going to have some software that'll kind of replicate that, and so I'm excited. It's hopefully everything goes well. It's going to be good.
We enjoy going to classes, even if we think we know a lot.
Yeah.
We're at the age, maybe we did, but we don't remember.
Sure. All right, turning on my camera. Hey everybody, my name is Nathan Smith. I'm the Digital Programming Coordinator here at the Central Arkansas Library System. Thanks for hanging out while we made sure everybody got where they needed to be, and so on and so forth. But this is Microsoft Word Part 1. Thanks so much for joining us. Folks online, so one of the things I like to say at the beginning of class every time is, if you have questions, speak up and let me know. Don't worry about whether it feels like it might be a silly question, or if you think I might roll my eyes, I'm not going to. We all have different skills, and we all, there's plenty of stuff I know that you don't, and there's plenty of stuff you know that I don't. So I'm not judging. The point of a technology class is for you to learn something useful about technology. So if that's what's happening, we're good to go. And if it's not, then we got a problem, regardless of whether I'm on track with my outline or things like that. So obviously, y'all are here in the classroom. You just shout out. And folks who are joining us online, please feel free to use the chat if you're on YouTube or Zoom, or use the comments if you're on Facebook. And I'll see those and be able to respond to those questions, just like the questions from folks here in the classroom. Also, folks online, if there are technical difficulties, please let me know right away. If my mic goes out, if my camera stops, if the screen freezes up, let me know that that's happening, so that way I can make sure it gets addressed quickly and as seamlessly as possible, so we don't have to go back and retread a bunch of stuff that we already talked about. So yes, please let me know if there are technical problems. And that's about it. Y'all probably remember, but the restrooms are at the end of the hallway. So, cool. Let's do it. So, this is Microsoft Word Part 1. We do have Part 2 coming up next week, same time, same place. Basically, what we're going to be doing for today's session is we're going to be talking about just the basics of using Word. So, we're going to talk. There's a ton of different stuff that we can potentially cover, but we're going to talk about sort of basic, what we call formatting, kind of making your document look the way you want it to, and a whole bunch of other stuff like that, general layout of the program, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to fire up the screen sharing so that the folks online can see my screen here. Great. Okay, so I've got Word open. Y'all can go ahead and just open it up, double click it. It should be on the desktop there. We'll just start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. When you first fire up Word, by the way, here in the classroom, we're using Word 2013. I have the latest version of Word on my computer, and I guess this one's almost 10 years old at this point. We probably won't have this version come next week. We'll probably be using a newer version. But for now, I'm using 2013, and it's going to be perfectly fine. Your Word hasn't, it has changed, but it hasn't changed that much. So most of the functionality that I'm going to be talking about is applicable to any version of Word. I have the latest version on my laptop, and everything I'm going to talk about is exactly the same pretty much, except for maybe some minor differences in where it's located or that sort of thing. And I'll try to point those out as we encounter them. So when you fire up Word, you should get this type of situation right here. This is kind of like your start page. And over on the left, or in newer versions down here on the bottom, you'll have a list of recent documents that you've opened on your computer. And up at the top here, you should have some options for templates, basically for kind of like starter documents that you can do so that you don't have to worry about starting from absolute scratch if you, as you're working on your document. So, but we are going to start from scratch here in class. So I'm going to go ahead and click the blank document option right here. You don't see a lot of templates on mine, by the way, because I think because this version of Word is old and it kind of, whatever servers they use to kind of show you the other templates have been taken down and stuff at this point, but that's fine. Y'all both have little sidebars that popped up. You can go ahead and hit the X at the top right of those sidebars on the left there and just get rid of those. Because it's not anything important, I'm sure. Oh, there should be one, but, well, I guess there's a close button at the bottom of yours. That one should surely have an X, I think. But I could be wrong. Huh. Okay, well, let's see. Oh, yeah, here we go. Wow. All right. Excellent. So, we've kind of got our main screen here. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the layout. So, there's a bunch of stuff to mention here, but we're not going to spend a ton of time on it because we want to dig into the actual deeper content of the class. Up at the top left here, we have what's called the Quick Access Toolbar. In newer versions of Word, you won't see this little Word icon at the very top left. That's been left out because you don't really need it. It doesn't do much that's unique or interesting. But then next to that are these buttons right here. There's a Save button, there's Undo, and there's the Repeat or Redo button. So when you click the Save button, of course. If this is a new document that you're just starting out working with, when you click that Save button, then it's going to ask you, it's actually going to trigger a feature called Save As. So it's going to ask you to name your document, and it's going to ask you where on your computer you want to store it. So what folder you want to put it in. Once you decide on that and you hit Save, then then your document, your work so far has been saved. You won't have to worry about losing it unless something goes way wrong. And then in the future, when you've made further changes or added onto the document, if you want to update that saved version of it, you just click the Save button, and it'll just do it in the background without you even really having to think about it. You might not even see anything happen at all. You just click that button and then move on with your life because your work's been saved. So, so that's the Save button, pretty straightforward. Next to that is the Undo button. This exists because we're all human and we all make mistakes, right? So if I come up here and I click the Undo button, this little arrow that's off to the left here, then it will just take back whatever the last action was that I took. So, for example, if I deleted a paragraph of text and I went, oh, I didn't mean to delete that, I can go up here, click the Undo button, and it will put it back where it was before. If I make multiple mistakes in a row, and who among us hasn't done that, right? Then I can hit the Undo button multiple times, and each time it goes back in my sort of history of editing my document so that I can undo those multiple mistakes. But sometimes I might get a little overexcited. Maybe I make a few mistakes and then I hit the Undo button several times in a row. Like, let's say I made 3 mistakes, but I accidentally hit the Undo button 5 times. Well, I've undone some work that I intended to keep, right? So that's where the Redo button comes in. The Redo button actually undoes your undoing. And so, so up here, it'll look actually just like the Undo button, except backwards. It'll be an arrow that's pointing off to the right. When I hit the Redo button, it undoes your undoing. So like if I hit the Undo button 5 times, but I should only hit it 3, I can hit the Redo button twice, and then I'm good to go. Couple of tricks with one key thing with the Redo button. The Redo button only appears, and it only works, as the next action after you hit Undo. So let's say that so in the same scenario, if I hit the Undo button 5 times when I should only hit it 3 times, then then I'm going to have undone some of my work. But if I didn't realize that and I hit Undo 5 times and I go and I make some other changes to my document and then I'm like, oh, there's some stuff missing, I can't use the Redo button at that point. It's kind of like a time travel movie. You go back in time and you avert disaster and, save the president or whatever. Like, when you come back, the timeline's different. And, the Twin Pines Mall is the Lone Pine Mall and stuff like that. So, so you want to make sure if you hit Undo, particularly if you hit Undo multiple times, you want to check over your work really quick just to make sure you didn't undo some work you intended to keep. If you did, there's the Redo button right there. That's your friend. And you can just hit Redo and, and keep on trucking. But if you didn't, if you only undid stuff that you wanted to undo, then you can go about your business and you don't even have to worry about it. So that's my advice to you, and that's the Undo and Redo buttons here. Otherwise, when you haven't just hit Undo, the Repeat button is up here instead. The Repeat button is this kind of circular arrow, kind of looks like the refresh button in your web browser. But basically, all that, what that'll do is repeat an action over and over again. So if you turn some text red, and then you come down to another spot in the document and you select some other text, you can hit the Repeat button to turn it red as well, that kind of thing. So I don't often use the Repeat button because usually I find it to be just as easy to click the same button that I just clicked a moment ago, but your mileage may vary. Next to that is this little drop-down arrow right here. I can add extra things to the quick access toolbar if I want to, other tools or what we call commands in the program. Or I can click more commands and add almost anything in all of Word that I can do up to that quick access toolbar. So if there's something you find yourself hunting for a lot, you can throw it up in the quick access toolbar, and that way it'll be easier to find in the future. Underneath that is what we call the ribbon. The ribbon is this design concept that Microsoft likes an awful lot, and honestly, what's not to like? It's pretty handy. In a lot of other programs, you'll have sort of menus up at the top, and then you'll have a series of toolbars, and then there's like little pop-up windows that can float all over the place and stuff like that. And not that those programs are necessarily bad, but sometimes that makes it hard to find what you're looking for, because you're like, well, is it up here in the edit menu, or is it on the toolbar over here, or whatever? So what Microsoft did was they kind of combined those things together into the ribbon. So rather than having little menus up here where you click on File or Edit or Select or whatever, instead you have these tabs. So the Home tab here is kind of your basic tools. These are tools that folks, that you or other folks who use Word will probably tend to use an awful lot. And so they want to make it easy for you to get to them. And so they put them right here on the Home tab. Next, the Home tab is the Insert tab. And when I click on Insert up here, you'll notice all the tools that were listed down below suddenly change. So now I get a whole different set of tools or commands that deal with, as you might imagine, inserting things into your document, like a table or a picture or a chart or any number of things. The Design tab here, by the way, some of these tabs may be named slightly different things in newer versions of Word, but they do the same thing. The Design tab here is going to give me, to be specific, it's going to give me style sets and themes, but that's saying too much. That will be something we'll talk about in next week's session. For now, just know it changes the look of your document. And it's pretty cool once you get the hang of it. Okay, the Page Layout tab here, this has things like the margins for your document. So how close is your text allowed to get to the edge of the page? Your orientation, in other words, is your page sort of, come on now, oh. All right, we got to go 100%. Oh, I changed the view. Watch out. There we go. So the page orientation, in other words, is your page sort of hot dog shape or more of a hamburger shape like this? And then you've got your size, so you can choose the actual size of page that you're working with, the number of columns, and a whole bunch of other stuff like that. References, this allows you to cite your sources if you're writing some sort of nonfiction thing, particularly for publication. Super important to cite your sources if you're getting something published, because you don't want to be accused of plagiarism, and you don't want to actually do plagiarism also. So, so this is pretty important, and it's a good way to sort of cite the places you're getting your information. The Mailings tab here concerns primarily doing what's called a mail merge, which is basically creating a document where you can have a version of it for each recipient that's personalized to them. We're going to talk about this next week in part 2, and it's super duper handy. So we won't spend a whole lot of time talking about that because we're going to talk about it next week. The Review tab here contains basically tools for checking your work in various ways. You have spelling and grammar check. You have the built-in thesaurus where you can look up other words so that you don't use a word repeatedly and sound a little redundant. You can get things like your word count. There are automated tools here to translate your document into a different language. If you want to sound professional or honestly even understandable in a different language, I would recommend forgetting that these exist and hiring a translator that's fluent in that language. You've got a lot of collaboration tools, which we'll talk about those next week as well. Finally, the View tab here basically changes how you see your document without changing the content of it. So things like zoom, of course, are here. You can zoom in and out and so forth. You've got your, you have different layouts that you can view your document in, although I don't make a lot of use of those, to be really honest with you. You've got a bunch of other stuff that's like that, basically changing the look of things. And then finally, well, so over here I have, and I think probably everybody here in the classroom has the Developer tab. We're not going to spend any time talking about the Developer tab this week or next week. And normally you won't see it. You have to reveal that by going into the settings in Word, and it gives you some advanced options that you probably won't need, honestly. And then finally over here on the left is the File tab. When I click on that, it takes me to an area that's known as the Backstage. And essentially what this is it's kind of a way of, it's a way of dealing with your document as a computer file rather than dealing with the contents of it. So, you know, most of the time you're going to be looking at it in this view, which is sort of, you know, where you're composing your document, you're making your text look the way you want it to look, you're changing the fonts, you're changing the colors, and all that sort of stuff. But here you're going to see in the Backstage, there's the info area. You're going to see things like how much space is this document taking up on my computer, who created the file and who changed it last and when did they do that, how many pages are there, how many words are there, and so on and so forth. And you can check for issues in case you're trying to get your document to people with certain disabilities, you know, who use a screen reader or things like that. You want to check for issues to make sure that they can access the contents of your document, stuff like that. I'm not going to click on them all, but there's new to create a new document, open to open an existing one on your computer, save and save as, which we talked about, print, obviously, share, which is basically just sending your file to people online, and there's a lot better ways to do it than starting inside of Word, to be honest. Export. Now this is one I want to spend just a moment on. So when I click export over here, it's going to give me a few options, but the key one that I want to bring out is this one right here that says create PDF/XPS document. And this is something that's kind of important to know about from time to time. It says create a PDF/XPS document, and there are some advantages to doing this sometime, but honestly I can't put it much better than what they wrote here. So it preserves the layout, formatting, fonts, and images in your document. In other words, what it's doing is it's making sure your document looks to the recipient exactly as it looked on your screen when you were creating it. And that's significant because if you send your Word file to someone else, let's say you're using a Windows computer and you send it to someone who has a Mac, well, it might not look exactly the same on their Mac versus your PC. Let's say you send it to someone who has a Windows computer, but they don't have the same fonts installed on your computer that as you do. Guess what? Your document's not going to look the same when they open it up on their computer. You might be sending it to someone who's going to open it on their phone or on their iPad or something like that. And so again, they probably have a different version of Word, or they may be using some sort of app that's not Word to open your Word document. So your document might look different. So a PDF, honestly, nobody uses these XPS documents. That's something Microsoft made, and I guess that's why they're attached to it. But a PDF document does all of these, you know, preserves all this stuff, so it looks exactly the same as the way you designed it. Yeah.
Normally in a PDF, you can actually edit it or do some editing. This system is not where you would try to do something like that.
Yes, that's a great question. So yeah, normally with a PDF, you can't do much editing with it. It's kind of almost like, really, it's almost like printing something off and then like taking it and kind of scribbling on it. Those are the kinds of edits that you can typically do, and that's true. Word doesn't even really open PDF documents. It can create them. So if you wanted to edit, so the way that it would work is like, if you want to send your Word document to someone as a PDF, what you want to do is go into Word, open it up, use this create PDF/XPS. It'll create a separate file on your computer and you send that to them. If you want to make changes to it, usually what you have to do is open the Word document back up and then more or less save over the original version, so that,
Use your security keys and things or tabs to protect it so that nobody can change it and pass it on as being what I sent them.
Yeah, you kind of can do that. Yeah. So there's PDFs. PDFs have some security things built into them. I mean, typically though, like 99% of the time, people aren't like, in order to edit a PDF, you have to have kind of expensive software. I happen to have it on my laptop here, or the main piece of software that does that is Adobe Acrobat Pro. And it's about, I think the cheapest you can get is about $20 a month. And yeah, and even when you make edits to a PDF with that software, it's kind of clunky and it doesn't look quite right a lot of times. So yeah, it's really hard to convincingly change a PDF.
What does the acronym stand for?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question too. Yeah, PDF stands for Portable Document Format.
I always think of it as a picture.
Yeah, well, it kind of is like that. I think of it a lot as kind of a digital printout, because that's really what it amounts to. Yeah, those are great questions. So yeah, we already covered this. Content can't be easily changed. And it says free viewers are available on the web. I probably would rephrase that one to, you can open a PDF on darn near anything. So, whether it's a standard that's been around for a long time, so older computers, newer computers, printers a lot of times can just open them up directly and print them out, like if you plug in a flash drive that's got one stored on it. I've got like my little Kindle Paperwhite can open a PDF, and so can the fancy iPad that we just bought a few months ago and stuff like that. So it's really handy. The times that I like to send a PDF versus a Word document are times where I need to be extra sure I'm making a good impression. So I always recommend, if people are job hunting, I always recommend that they send their resume and cover letters or whatever as a PDF rather than a Word document, even if they made it in Word. And anything that you're going to distribute to a big audience. So for example, the calendars for that list when the technology classes are happening, I always create a PDF of that and post it on the website, because anybody can come along on the website, click that, and click on it and open it up. And most web browsers will display a PDF without any additional software. So that's a little tangent on PDFs, but I find it's worth it because it's really helpful sometimes to have this functionality. There are also 3 additional options here that I'm not going to click on. Close, which will close your document without closing Word. Account, which allows you to manage your Microsoft account if you've got one and you're signed into it. And then options, which basically allows you to change the settings for Word. I typically don't find I need to do that a whole awful lot. But you might need to get in there sometime. That's how you do it. I'll just hit this left arrow to get back out of here without doing anything in the backstage. Finally, of course, we've got our document here. By default, we have what's called the ruler up here at the top and over on the left-hand side. So it shows us what part of the page we're on and basically measures bits of the page out for us. So I can see, like, just at a glance, I can tell I have 1-inch margins on the left and right here, because that's the gray areas at the top of the ruler. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half. So that tells me, this is an 8.5-inch wide piece of paper, just a standard letter size piece of paper, and 1-inch margins. Yeah?
What are you calling ruler?
This thing right up here.
Oh, that. Oh,
Yeah, and then,
ruler.
and this over here as well.
All those other options up there.
Oh, that's called the ribbon, yeah.
Okay, well, the ribbon is, to me, where it says file comments or.
Yes.
What's underneath there?
Oh, well, I guess so. Yeah, technically, I think technically you're right now that you mention it. Well, I guess it all is the ribbon, but then they call this part the tabs, and they call this part the commands. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Good clarification. And then down here at the bottom, you've got a couple of additional things in this bottom area called the status bar. There's the number of pages, and you can see which page you're on, and a word count as well. That's a running word count. And then I have this little slider over here where I can zoom in and out if I want to. And I'll zoom in a smidge, because why not? Okay. So let's go ahead and get some text in here. I'm just going to type silly stuff. Y'all can copy it if you want or not. It doesn't really matter. Just whatever you want to write. I'm kind of a slow typist, actually, but I do okay. So let's type some stuff. There we go. All right. So that's my little paragraph. A few things to point out here. For folks who might not be familiar, y'all already know this here in the classroom, but for folks who might not be familiar, of course, when I get to the end of a line, I don't have to do anything to continue. I just keep typing, and it moves on down to the left-hand side of the next line. Once I've run out of room, basically. And I've also got, a couple little stylistic notes. A lot of us learned back in school that you want to indent the first line of a paragraph. We basically never do that anymore because we're writing on a computer and because Word and other word processing software actually adds a little bit of visual separation between our paragraphs. you'll notice if I hit enter to start a new paragraph, I've got a little gap here in between. And Word automatically adds that, so that way it's, and that serves the same purpose as adding an indent at the beginning of the paragraph. It adds that visual separation so you can tell which paragraph is which. The other thing that a lot of us learned when we learned to type was to add 2 spaces after the punctuation at the end of your sentence. You no longer have to do that. Again, the software will kind of automatically space things appropriately, so don't worry about it. Just add 1 space, it's fine. Nobody's gonna, the police aren't gonna come for you if you add 2 spaces, but you just don't need to.
The old English teachers are rolling over.
Yep, no doubt, no doubt. So we've got our text here, and now what I want to do is talk for a few minutes about what we call formatting. I think I mentioned briefly the way, or this bit of computer world jargon. But when we say formatting in computer world, what we mean is the look of something, not the content. So, for example, let's go ahead and change the formatting in this second paragraph here, or in whatever text you happen to have typed. So I'm going to hold down with my mouse button just to the right of this paragraph. And while I'm holding down, I'm going to move my mouse over until I get this text shaded in gray here. That is, well, that's called selecting the text that I want to work with. I can also select the text using my keyboard. The way that works is I'm going to hold Shift while moving the cursor, this blinking line here. I'm going to hold Shift while moving the cursor around wherever I want it to be. So I can hold Shift and hold down the arrow keys like this, or my personal preference a lot of times is to use the Home and End keys on your keyboard. If you press Home, it takes your cursor to the beginning of the line. If you press End, it takes it to the end of the line. So I can so at the end of a line, I can hold Shift and press Home, and I'll select the entire line of text. It's just above the arrow keys, so in the middle. So there's Insert, Delete, Home, and End. Yeah. It's trickier on a laptop because a lot of times on a laptop, you actually have to hold the Function key at the bottom and press, like, on my laptop, you hold Function and you press the left and right arrow keys in order to use Home and End. So that's a little tricky. I have to do Function, Shift, Left to get the same effect. But, still, once you get the hang of it, it is slightly more convenient. Takes less time. So, however you select your text doesn't really matter, but we're going to make some changes to the look of our text here. So I want to, up here at the top in the Home tab, by the way, if you're not on the Home tab, make sure you click Home up here so you can see, these same options. Up at the top in the Home tab, we've got, it says Calibri and then Body in parentheses. The reason it says Body, well, you don't have to worry about it too much. We'll touch on it next week a little bit, but Body is not part of the name of this font. And of course, for anybody who's not familiar, fonts are just the look of your text. So, so Calibri is the default font here, but we could also do Times New Roman. That was the old default. You can do or any number of things. You can go crazy and you can install more fonts. I've got this Lord of the Rings font on here. That's kind of fun. And all kinds of things. So let's say we do want to change our font. I will change it to, I don't know. Let's see. We'll change it to just, let's change it to Times New Roman because you can clearly see the difference between those two. So we've got that. Um, and so I've changed that to I've changed this bit of text that I had selected to Times New Roman. When I choose that out of the menu here by pressing the little arrow, clicking the little arrow and selecting something else, then it changes all the text that I had selected. Or if I don't have anything selected, what it's going to do is change the text from wherever my cursor is moving forward. So, so if you're like, oh, and I need to change fonts now, then just go up to the top, click the other font that you want to use, and keep typing, and it'll do it. So next to that is the font size. So I can click here, and I can see a variety of sizes. The default size is 11, and that's kind of the yeah, right. That's kind of the default, and that's also the standard. That's kind of the standard sort of 11, or that's kind of the standard font size for business applications for the most part. So we've got our font, so 11 is kind of how it starts, but then we can make it larger if we want to by selecting one of these other numbers. We can make it smaller. We could also click here and actually type a number in. So you'll notice that the list goes from 18 to 20 to 22 to 24 to 26 to 28, etc. Let's say we wanted it to be 31 or 32. If I click up here, type in 32 and press enter, then we get an in-between size if we want it. So you could type any size in here. You can go larger than 72 if you want to. Whatever you need, whatever fits your particular situation. I'll make it a little bit bigger. I'll go with 14 for now. Next to that, we have a couple of buttons that do the font size either larger or smaller. So if we click increase font size, then it'll just go up to the next number that's in this list. If I hit the little smaller A with the down arrow, we can go down to the smaller one. Now, and then down here at the bottom, we've got bold, italics, underlining, strike through, subscript, and superscript. So these you're probably familiar with in some context or another. Bold, obviously. If I click on the B, it's going to turn my text bold. Click it again, it's going to unbold the text. If I hit I, it's going to italicize it. Hit it again, it's going to unitalicize. If I click on the U, it's going to give me a regular old single underline. If I click on the drop-down arrow next to the U, it's going to give me a bunch of options for other styles of underlining. So I could do sort of dotted lines, kind of a dashed one, dash even, a lot of different things here, sort of a squiggly one, double underline, and a thicker one. And you've got a whole bunch of other options here, and you can even change the color. If you choose a different style here, then at the top, it's kind of hard to see in this particular situation, but it actually changes what's showing here on the button. So if I go what it's done is change the default. So if I go up here and I want to underline this text as well, if I click on the U, it's now going to give me that dot dash underline like I had down there. So whichever one you last used, that's the default, and that's what you're going to get when you click the button. So let's see. We've also got strike through if you want to have words in your document but they're crossed out. You've got subscript and superscript. Now these are a little less common. Superscript you actually see a lot. So let me show you. If I press enter here, and let's say I'm going to turn underlining off. And let's say I type December 3rd or whatever and press enter. You'll notice it automatically kind of makes the RD in third smaller. That's actually an example of superscript. And that's something that Word does automatically, kind of by default, which is called auto format. When it does things like this, you can reverse them if you choose to just by hitting undo. So if I hit undo, it's going to change it to a standard RD rather than superscript. And of course, if you want to do this manually, you just type out the text that you want, and then you hit the superscript button right here. Subscript, honestly, I've only ever seen it in science and mathematics and stuff. It's used for logarithms and chemistry and things like that. But you know, I mean, if you do those things, you might need to use it, or there may be other purposes I'm not thinking of. But those are kind of the options that you have there. So you've got, next to that, you have a few more. There's your, let's see. So there's this button right here, text effects and typography. So you've got, you can go through and select these different styles, or you can change individual elements. For example, adding an outline like this one has, or this one, adding a shadow behind the text, adding reflection underneath the text like this one has, adding a glow of a particular color around it, adding or changing the number styles and ligatures and stylistic sets. Now these are a little bit different. Those all depend on the font that you're using. So if you're using a big, or so if you're using a font that has a, if you're using a font that has, or that supports these features, then you'll get some, with certain combinations of letters or numbers, you'll get some interesting effects. For example, ligatures are going to be something like this, where, for example, this F and I are next to each other, and the top of the F and the, or the stick of the F and the I, top of the I are connected together. So things like that, whether that's on or off, you can change that here. You can also do highlighting, which we'll come back to in a moment. But I've got this A right here, this A button. If I click on that, it's got a red color swatch underneath it. It's going to turn my text red. If I click on the drop-down arrow next to it and I pick something else, then I can change my text to any color I want. And again, just like with the underlining, if I select a color, then over here on the button, you'll notice that color is the color swatch underneath. And so that's become the default, just like happened with the underlining. Right, yeah, and it's just for now. If I go and select something else and I choose a different color, then that color becomes the default. But yeah, when you close Word, then it's going to revert back to red. Yeah, that's good. So highlighting's a little bit different, so we're going to circle back to that here in a second. There's also this A button with the eraser. Let me show you that first. That's the Clear All Formatting button. If I select some text, and then I click on that A button with the eraser, then it changes any of these, or it sets any of these settings back to the default. So, changing the color, changing the size, it'll change all this stuff. If I hit A, or if I hit that right now, changes it right back to the way it was before I started messing with it. And so if you're like, oh, I made too many changes, this is starting to look real weird, I need to just start over, that's how you do it. Or if you want to standardize everything because you're maybe taking text from different sources and things like that, like, different emails from different people who use different fonts, or, 5 different documents, and you're trying to synthesize them all together. That's a good way to make everything look more standardized. So next to that is, down here is a highlighting, and that is one exception to this Clear All Formats button. What this does is it works a lot like taking a literal highlighter marker and going through, going through a document. So, for example, if I wanted to highlight this sentence, good thing we brought food. I'm going to click on the highlight button, and you'll notice it turns my mouse pointer into the same mouse pointer but with a highlighting pin next to it. I'll hold down and drag just like I did before, and when I let go, it highlights it in yellow. If I do that again on the exact same text, then it's going to unhighlight it for me. And I can click this to get out of highlighter mode, basically. If I click here, I can change, or I can select a color. And of course, if I have some text selected before I click the highlighter, rather than going to highlighter mode, it's just going to highlight the text I have selected. And I can select it again and click the highlighter to unhighlight it. But clear all formats does not clear out highlighting. You could use multiple, by the way, the reason that this you can change, or when you change the colors here, you can use multiple colors of highlighting for different color coding, just like you would with real highlighting markers. So that's helpful. Okay, finally, last thing in this little section is the change case button. And it's pretty simple. What it does is either sentence case, so if I have this selected, it's going to capitalize basically only the first word of the sentence, unless it happens to be some word that word can tell is a proper noun. Lowercase is going to give you all lowercase, even at the beginning of sentences and everywhere else. Uppercase is all caps, of course. Capitalize each word is exactly what it sounds like. And toggle case is going to make everything that was capital lowercase and everything that was lowercase capital. So you can use that to quickly sort of straighten out your capitalization or add some stylistic element if you want to. So, okay, that's the font settings. Let's go ahead and talk about our paragraph settings here really quick. It's another thing that, okay, it's being weird. Whoop. Okay. All right. So up here next to this font section is our paragraph section. And in our paragraph section, we're going to do some other stuff. By default, Excel will align your text along the left-hand margin of your document. So you'll notice the left-hand margin looks nice and clean. It's totally flat. The right-hand margin is sort of more, is sort of more jagged, I would say. And so, so it's just going to, you're just going to go from the left to right, and once it runs out of room, it'll just move your stuff on down to the next one. If I click the center button here, what it's going to do is it's going to center my text so that I have, if there's space, between my text and the margins, it's going to be the same amount of space on the left as it is on the right. And that's pretty straightforward. If I click on the Align Right button, it's going to align my text along the right-hand margin. And as I type, basically my cursor, the little blinking line, is going to stay on the right-hand side, and the text is just going to stream out behind it until I run out of room, and then I'm going to head down to the next line. So it's basically the same as Align Left, but it's just on the right-hand side instead. And then finally, you have Justify. When I click on this, it's going to change my text so that it looks like it's aligned along the left-hand margin. But you'll notice the right margin is also pretty clean. So what it's doing is, except for the last line of each paragraph, it's actually adjusting the spaces in between my words so that it's aligned with, so that the ends of my text are aligned with both margins. That's kind of a, so if you look at most sort of professional publications, usually they use justified text. Look at a book, a magazine, definitely newspapers, they always use justified text. And so that can give your document a nice kind of cleaner, more professional look. Okay, Next to that is this space line and paragraph spacing button here. If I click on this, by the way, whenever I make changes to these, or in this paragraph section, I just have to have my cursor somewhere in the paragraph that I'm changing. So you'll notice I didn't need to select a whole paragraph or even a sentence. I'll just leave my cursor here somewhere in this paragraph and it changes it. If I wanted to change multiple paragraphs though, I would select them with the mouse or the keyboard and then make the changes up here so that it applies to all of them at once. Okay, so our line and paragraph spacing. By default, Word will space your lines at 1.15. So what that means is there's the height of your lines is about this, but then there's 15 hundredths of the height of a line in between the two lines that you're looking at there. So, so that's the default, 1.15. If you want to go with a strict single space, you just move it up to 1.0. You'll notice it's squished down a little bit more. 1.5 gives you half a line's worth of space. Double space, 2.5, and then triple space there. You also have line spacing options, so if you want to tweak it more, you totally can. Down here at the bottom, we have add space before paragraph and remove space after paragraph. Now remember, by default, I mentioned Word will add this little gap in between paragraphs, and so if you don't want it to add that gap, you can click remove space after paragraph, and it won't. Or at least it will remove that from the particular paragraph that you're changing. If you select your whole document, and you select that, then it's going to remove that space for every paragraph. And then add space before paragraph basically does the same thing, but rather than, you'll notice if I select here, I've got this little gap right there. It would also add a gap above this one that basically goes along with this second paragraph. Okay, so there's a couple other buttons here. We're not going to really spend time on those because they're not terribly useful. Up here at the top of the paragraph section, though, is your list options, and this is definitely useful. So let's say that I am making a list of, I don't know, meals. So I'm going to, what I'm going to do is come down here, I'll press enter on my keyboard, and I'll just start typing breakfast, lunch, dinner. This is kind of a list, but it sort of looks bad. It's hard to tell that it's a list. It looks like I just started writing some paragraphs and then gave up. So I want to make it look more like a list so that people can clearly see what it is. I'm going to come up here, select this text, click on, and I'm going to click on the bullets button right here. When I click on that, what it's going to do is indent a little bit. It's actually going to remove some of the space between these lines of text, and it's going to add these bullet points next to it. If I wanted to add an additional, something in here, I can go to the end of a line, press enter, and put in, afternoon tea or whatever. And then like midnight snack. Great. So I've got all that. So now I can keep typing my list and listing out things, and it'll all look kind of the way I want it to look. If I want to stop listing things, I can press enter, and I'll get another bullet point, but I press enter again, or I hit backspace a couple of times, 3 times actually to be precise, and now I'm back to where I need to be, and there we go. Okay, if I want, so this is what we call an unordered list. It's got bullet points, but that kind of implies that they're not necessarily in a particular order. But obviously, these are in a particular order. So let's say that I want to note that. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to click on the numbering button at the top. And when I click on that, it's going to indent again, and this time it's going to give me number 1. Great. Again, if I press enter and then either hit backspace 3 times or just press enter again once, great. Okay. So there's a few things that I can do to tweak this. Let's say that I don't want these bullet points, I want some other symbol here. I can come up to the top while I have this selected. I can come to the top, or I have my cursor here. I can come to the top and click the drop down arrow next to the bullets button. And that's going to give me some other options for bullet points I could use, like a check mark, for example. Or I can even come up here and click define new bullet if I really want to, and I can make basically any symbol in any font on my computer into a bullet point if I need to. Similarly, with the numbered lists, I can click up here in the numbering, or on the arrow next to the numbering button, and in this drop-down list, I can change my numbering format. So rather than 1, 2, 3, I could do A, B, C. I could do Roman numerals. I could do numbers with a parenthesis next to them. I could do letters with a parenthesis next to them. Whatever the case may be, I've got a bunch of different options here. Then another thing that I can do, another thing that I can do is create what's called a multi-level list. So if I go to the end, let's say I want to kind of fill out the concept of breakfast for my readers a little bit more. So I'll press enter here. It's going to give me number 2. But then I'm going to hit tab on the left-hand side of my keyboard. When I hit tab, what it's going to do is give me an A right there. So I can say, cereal, toast, eggs, fruit, bacon, etc., etc. So, and then if I want to elaborate on fruit, I'll press enter, hit tab again, and now I can say apple, orange, banana. Great. So that's called a multi-level list. If I want to go down a level, if I'm like, oh, I need to add some more to my list of kind of main, of my kind of main list of breakfast items, I'll hold shift while pressing tab, and then I can put in, sausage. There we go. Great. Okay, so that's a multi-level list. If you're working on a multi-level list, you might, particularly if you're several layers deep, you might have to hit backspace several times in order to get back to typing regular text, but just do it until it gets over here to the left-hand margin. All right, so let's talk about let's tackle a few other things here. So one thing that I want to talk about is how to add a picture into your document, because sometimes that's something you need to do. In order to do this, though, I need a bunch of text. So I'm going to show you a little bonus thing here. I'm going to hold down with my mouse button, and I'm going to select this whole paragraph. And then I'm going to copy and paste it a whole bunch, so that way I get a lot of copies of this paragraph. I can use the mouse to do that. I'll click with the right mouse button and click copy. But the easier way to do this is with the keyboard. I'm going to hold Control, CTRL, at the bottom of my keyboard. And then while I'm holding Control, I'm going to press C, Control C. That is the keyboard shortcut for copy, not only in Word, but in pretty much any program in all of Windows. So once you know that keyboard shortcut, you can use it almost anywhere. And then I'm going to use the similar keyboard shortcut for paste. Again, you could right-click and click paste in the menu, but it's easier to do it with the keyboard. So to paste, I'm going to put my cursor where I want it to be, and then press Control-V, 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 V, 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 V. Good enough. Okay. The way I like to remember that, by the way, since that's also the sort of universal keyboard shortcut for paste, the way I like to remember that is the V kind of looks like an arrow, and it's pointing to the spot where you want to paste something in. So let's say that I want to add a picture into my document. I'm just gonna put my cursor right here inside this paragraph. And then I'm gonna come up, I'm gonna click the Insert tab, and I'm gonna click on Pictures. Now, in other versions of Word, this might look slightly different. You might see Pictures and then a drop-down menu for how you get the pictures. Or you might click on Picture and then you might actually see a little box that pops up that says, where do you want to get a picture? Do you want to get it on your computer or from online or whatever? I'm just going to click this Pictures one, which is going to take me to where I can select a picture from my computer. And let's say we'll go with the bookshelf. Click on that. I'll click Insert. And that's going to drop this picture of the bookshelf right here. Now, what has happened, because this picture is pretty big, and because of the way that Word treats pictures, you'll notice that I have my text all the way to the end of the line here. Because Justify is on for this paragraph, it's made the spaces very big between these words. And Word, because it's primarily a writing program rather than a graphic design program, Word will pretty much treat your pictures as though they're part of your text. And so wherever your cursor is, the little blinking line, in your text when you insert a picture, that's where the picture is. In fact, if I make it pretty small, so if I click on it and I drag from one of these corners here, it's going to resize it. If I make it small, you can see how literal that is. Means it wasn't night either, period, picture. Actually, the storminess is in question as well. So it's literally right there inside of the text. So sometimes that's the right move, but usually that's not what you want, honestly. So what you want to do is use the word wrap options that Word comes with. So I can either come over here to the side, there's a little button here that says Layout Options, or there's an extra tab up here right now while I have the picture selected called Picture Tools Format, and I can click that and I get some options. I can do some other stuff with the pictures as well. We're not going to dig into that, but you can add additional effects. You can even try to remove the background, although that is a little clunky to do, and so on and so forth. But the main thing I want to show you is these text wrapping options. If I click Wrap Text, notice I get in line with text, square, tight, through, top and bottom, behind text, or in front of text. Square is going to give me, basically it's going to give me a nice little gap around the picture that my text won't go through, but other than that, my text is going to kind of flow around the picture. Tight is the same thing, but it's going to close some of that gap. Through is going to give me basically the same thing, except if you have a picture with a transparent background, it'll actually allow the text to appear in the transparent areas. Top and bottom is exactly what it sounds like. Keeps text, the text just flows as normal, but then the picture is basically on its own line by itself. Behind text is exactly what it sounds like as well. The text will just go right over the picture. And then in front of text, the picture will just plop right down on top of the text. So you can do it however you want to. It just depends on how you want it to look, basically. One other thing to mention, though, is there's this option here, Move with Text, where there's Fix Position on Page. A lot of times I like to choose Fix Position on Page because then if you have Move with Text on, what's going to happen is as you're typing, eventually the picture is going to move. And that's not great. So it didn't do it for whatever reason, but it'll move with the text eventually if you've got that turned on. Whereas if I choose Fix Position on Page, then I can basically drag this anywhere and my text will just sort of flow around it. And that's usually what I want, honestly. Okay, so let's talk just briefly about some other layout things, and then we'll wrap it up. We're just about at the end. So one thing to talk about, which I mentioned briefly earlier, I'll just dig into it a little bit more here, is on the page layout tab, we have our margins, orientation, and size. So orientation we already talked about. Essentially, is your text or is your page kind of the long way, or is it kind of the wide way? The margins here, if you click on this, the normal kind of default margins are 1 inch on all sides, but you could do 1/2 inch on all sides if you want to. Moderate is 1 inch on the top and bottom, but only 3/4 of an inch on the left and right, and so on and so forth. And you can also do, I don't know why it's, maybe because I'm not in the text. That's interesting. You can also come down here and hit custom margins if you want to and define your own, just the way you want them. The size, this is literally the size of page that you're working with. By default, at least here in the US, it's going to be 8.5 by 11 inch paper, but you could do a legal size page, executive size page, which is weirdly smaller. I'm not sure why. Seems like you would want to be a little more efficient as an executive and have a normal size page, but whatever. Maybe that's why I'm not in the C-suite or whatever. But then you've got, some other sizes, 4 by 6 inches, 5 by 8 inches, European page sizes, and so on. So whatever page size you want, and you can, of course, define your own custom one by clicking more paper sizes. You can also do columns. There's a couple of different ways to do columns. The easiest way is just to apply it to the entire document, and all you have to do that is come up here to the top, click on the columns button, and click 2 or 3 or whatever, and it divides all the pages into multiple columns. Yeah?
Would you use the columns if you're doing like a newsletter or something like that?
Yeah, you totally could.
Okay. I know publishers, if you're
Yeah.
professional doing that sort of thing, you want the right application. But
Right.
just to do a quick something
Yeah.
like a flyer or something.
Yeah, that would make sense for a newsletter for sure. And you can, I'll even actually show you kind of the more detailed way to do it. Let me get rid of this picture because that's going to deeply confuse things if I start doing this. Excuse me, goodness. Let's say that you've got a title up at the top here. And I'll make it look a little bit different. Center it. Okay, I've got my title here. Obviously, I'm going to want that in the middle at the top of the page, right? But then I want columns to start down here. What I'm going to do is move my cursor to where I want the columns to start. And I'm going to come up to the top to this page layout again, click on columns, and click more columns. And then I can go ahead and select my option. I want 2 columns. And I'm going to click apply to this point forward. So where the cursor is, on down, I'll click OK. And now I get 2 columns here, but the title and anything that I might put before the title is going to only be in 1 column.
Okay. Doing that, had you said if you do whole page at the top, the title would have been affected by.
Yes, so the title would be here. It would still be centered, but it'd be centered inside of one of the columns. Yeah. And then,
Might be okay
yeah,
if you're wrapping to the next.
right, exactly. It all depends on what you're doing with it. One really useful thing, or the kind of the last thing that I want to touch on is breaks. These are, oh my goodness, something that are really handy. So, one thing that I find a lot, one easy way to show you this is with columns. So if I come up here and let's say, okay, I've got this copy of the paragraph that starts here, and kind of in the middle, it switches to the next column. And let's say, that doesn't look as clean as I might like it. So let's say I want to adjust that. I can totally do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here next to the next or to the part that I don't want to show up in this column here. And a lot of times if folks are just playing around with it, like they'll just kind of, to make it fit, they'll just kind of go enter, enter, enter until they get it at the top, right? But that's not usually a great way to do it. And it's particularly a problem if you make changes to the text, because then you get these big gaps and you have to close them back up and stuff like that. So instead of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here where it says breaks and click on that. And I'm going to click on column break right here. When I do that, what it does is it just moves it to the top of the next column. And if you want to see exactly what's happening, if I click on the Home tab, there's this little button here, which is, it kind of looks like a backwards P. This is your formatting marks button. If I click on that, it's going to show me little marks for all the invisible things that normally don't show up. So I've got a section break here, continuous, it says. And then down here, column break right there. So you can actually see the break. Each of these little backwards P things, those are going to be, those are where a paragraph ends and a new paragraph starts. And then there's actually a little dot between each of these words that represents the spaces. So you can see if there are multiple spaces in a particular spot. You can see little arrows a lot of times for indentation and a bunch of other stuff. So that's helpful sometimes if you're like, what is it doing? You can see. So another thing, I'll go ahead and turn that back off, and I'll undo a couple of these things so that I get one column again. Another similar thing that people often do is they get to the bottom of a page and they need to start a new section, or they're working on a book, it's the beginning of the next chapter or whatever. They'll go to the end and they'll hit enter, enter until they get to the top of the next page. Rather than doing that, what you want to do is, well, I'm going to undo that first of all. Rather than doing that, what you want to do is, again, come to right just to the left of the first thing that you want to appear on the next page. And then I'll go to my page layout again, click on breaks, and click page. And that's going to insert this page break. You can see it here, page break. And the page break, anything that occurs after the page break is going to take place at the beginning of the next page. Anything that occurs before the page break is going to stay on this page, or it's going to move on to the next page. If I added some more text here, oh well, whatever. If I add some extra text to the point where it doesn't show up, or where it's, if I add some extra text to the point where it ends up on the next page, the page break is still in effect. And so actually, it creates another new page and puts the next thing at the top. So that's really handy, because if you shorten something significantly or lengthen something significantly, this is going to keep you from having to go in and fiddle with what's on each page, and keeps everything separate that needs to be separate. And that's pretty much it. So what questions do y'all have for me, or anybody online, before we wrap it up?
For copying, you don't necessarily have to outline the whole thing. You just put your cursor at the beginning of the paragraph, and then you copy it.
Oh, for copy and paste? You do need to, for copy and paste, you do need to select everything that you want to copy.
The page, but what about the paragraph, like you did, Barbara?
Oh,
You made multiple.
changing these paragraph options you can do with just your cursor inside the paragraph. But yeah, if you,
And then you hit it as many times as you want. That paragraph
For these particular settings in the paragraph section up here, if it's anything else, copying and pasting, changing the look of your text or whatever, you do want to do that with the text selected, unless you want to make changes that are going to be like from this point forward.
But if you want to copy a whole paragraph,
Right.
you suggest that we highlight the whole paragraph.
You'll need to, yeah, for sure.
You mentioned something a minute ago, and I think that's what Bill's getting at, that you just put your cursor in the paragraph.
Right.
And then what happens?
So that was specifically for these settings in this paragraph section up here at the top. And so I can change like the alignment of the paragraph, for example, like align left or center it or things like that without having to select the paragraph. Or I can change like the line spacing, things like that. But it only applies to the paragraph that my cursor is in, unless I decide to select, in which case, like if I select these three and I make changes like that, it's going to center all three of these or align left or justify. But yeah, that's what I was talking about there. Yeah. Anything else? Cool. Well, I'm going to say bye to the folks online. Bye online, folks. Thanks for joining us. See you next time, next week maybe.